Creeping through the pines, aliens sending secret signs. EVPs in the dead of night, ghosts dancing in the pale moonlight. Paranormal for long, we bring it to ya. Truth behind the veil, gotta pursue ya. Talking about the strange, the freaky, the weird. Fearless, we dive wherever you see it. Portal opens in the woods so deep. Creatures crawl from a timeless sleep. Lights in the sky, they flicker and blaze. Signals from beyond these earthly days.
All right.
Woo, man.
Welcome, everybody. We got a few people already in here.
Got a good show tonight.
Yeah, we do. We got a great show.
I hope you're ready to hear some scary stories.
Yeah, some
spooky stories.
Spooky.
Some Appalachian spooky stories. Because that's what we're going to get some tonight.
Yeah. It's going to be
I'm
fun.
ready.
I may not be able to.
I like spooky stories.
I might not be able to sleep.
I'm tired enough. I'll be able to sleep tonight. I didn't sleep well last night. I haven't had any coffee today.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so it's my fault because I don't drink Cokes or anything else. So not having any coffee
So
is the culprit.
Yeah. Tonight we got an author. Her name is Tabitha Prock. She's a native of Monroe County, just a stone's throw from us right now. And that's in Tennessee. She began her writing career as a newspaper reporter in 1996. And her work celebrates the enduring spirit of mountain resilience and explores the supernatural side of the Appalachia. Her book, These Haunted Hills, it's a compilation. I said it, didn't I? Compilation.
Yes, you got it.
Of handed down ghost stories. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a compilation of handed down ghost stories and firsthand accounts of the strange and unexplained. Now, she also currently writes weekly stories for her Substack subscribers with her latest research into East Tennessee's paranormal accounts featured throughout the month of October. So, and you can go to her Substack at substack.com/@Tabitha Prock. So we're going to go ahead and bring her on. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm a little nervous that I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
Well, did I blotch it?
No, not at all. No, I wasn't sure what to write exactly. So I just, I use a lot of big words.
Well, I kind of rewrote it. So, I mean, it's something that I like to do to make it more pizzazz, make it bling.
Exactly. Yeah. You got to do that.
He's a blingy kind of guy. No.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Yes.
Tonight.
Thank you for coming and joining us.
I know I asked you a few months ago, and she never responded. Like she was scared. Maybe. This is fun. This is all fun.
Yeah. Ask our good friend Matt Sieber. The first time we asked him to come on our show, he come all the way out, and he told his wife, if I don't come back, these are the guys, and this is where they live.
Yeah, he came to the studio and done it, and didn't know us from Adam. Didn't know us from Adam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was brave.
Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of bravery, I was telling my sister earlier when we were talking about the show tonight that, Bigfoot is not really that scary, and shadow people are not that scary, but being on a live show to me is very scary. So, I'm trying to get my nerve.
Just remember this: we mess up all the time, and they don't really get us too bad for it. So no.
Okay, so maybe everybody will be kind to us tonight.
Yes. Yeah, you don't have to worry about it too much. I'll tell you what's funny about that is that the more you worry about it, the more when I sit there and start getting cognizant of what I'm doing instead of just letting it flow, I mess up more.
Oh, yeah,
I mess
I
up more. So
I
just
do the
talk
same.
like just talking to friends across the coffee table. That's it. That's all we are.
Okay, that sounds good.
Um, so, a question that we usually start off asking is, what got you into wanting to write the book and collect these, ghost stories and do these kinds of things?
So I was a kid in the 70s and a kid in the 80s. I was born in 75. So I was just born in a time when I think with Gen X and before that, our parents and our grandparents loved to tell scary stories to kids. And so I heard a lot of scary, strange stories, everything from ghost stories to more creepy paranormal things to there is a Bigfoot legend in Mount Vernon. We call it the White Thing. It's a white Bigfoot. And so I heard stories about it a lot. And just I've had actual experiences from childhood to adulthood that of things that I just cannot in no way explain, other than the fact that it's unexplainable. So that's kind of how I got started. I started collecting mentally first all the stories, and then as I grew older and had kids of my own, I started to realize, that my grandmother's getting older and my dad's getting older, and if I don't collect these stories and put them down, as busy as I am, I'm going to forget,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to have them for my grandchildren and thereafter. And they were stories that were just meant to be shared. I think oral history is a huge part of Appalachian culture. So I wanted to preserve that as best I could. And when Amazon came out and they started doing the self-publishing, I decided that used to tell my grandmother all the time when I was little, I'm going to put this into a book someday. So when the opportunity came about that I could go on to Amazon and create the book and make it available, she was just so happy when we first got those hard copy shipments and she could hold those stories in her hand and actually read them. She shared them with everybody. She told everybody about the stories because they are honestly they belong to all of us. They're our family stories.
Mm-hmm.
I just had the opportunity to put them all together into a book. And I still continue to put those together in other ways now, like on Substack. I've made 7 available for free tonight, and I have free stories all throughout my Substack. I think I have 27 stories in all. I just started about a month ago. So I plan on using that space a lot for writing in the future. And of course, in the month of October, I'm going to be adding even more of recent research that I've been doing. So I'm really excited about that too.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's a lot. So when you was doing collecting all these stories and everything like that, did you try to hit up all the the older folks first so you get all the
Absolutely.
stuff before they passed on?
Yeah, I sure did. And I was glad that I did. Um, Starting with my grandma, I would and go through again and again the same stories I had heard as a child. They started to even mean more as I grew older, so I came up with even more questions. And then, of course, the dawn of the internet, I could go and research and be like, where did Mama get this story about this witch turning into a deer? And I would be able to trace it, actually finding that a lot of our stories are Scottish heritage. Some of my family is of Cherokee heritage. So all that blending of these oral stories could be traced back far ancient than I ever imagined as a kid. And so I did. I started with her. My dad, who passed in 2020, but he was a great storyteller, so I collected a lot of stories from him. And anybody that I could meet up with as I was a newspaper reporter, that one of the first things that I did was go to my editor and publisher and say, please let me interview as many of the older generation as I possibly can. And so they let me do it. And I would go out and I would go through Coca Creek, through little pig trails, going all around trying to find these houses, these homes of people that didn't get out a whole lot that had wonderful stories. So as a newspaper reporter, I made that sort of my passion to get out there and collect as many of those stories as I could.
Was it hard for you to, I mean, it would be for me because I'm kind of shy when it comes to people and I'm doing a podcast. That's weird, ain't it? Anyway, it would be hard for me just to go knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, I'm doing this story." I would think they might shoot me.
That's actually where a great friend of mine, who I actually ended up writing his memoirs for him, his name was Sanford Gray. And Sanford owned Coker Creek Village at one point when they used to have the Autumn Gold Festival there. And Sanford and I became really good friends. And he knew that I loved to write these kind of stories. So I only had to write a couple for him to catch on and say, oh, I know this person and that person. And he would literally take me. I would follow him. He would make the introduction. He would invite some people to the Coker Creek Village General Store, and we would sit around and swap stories. And I'll never forget a little guy named Neil Kelly, who he had to play on his harp, his harmonica. He had to play Rosewood Casket before we started the interview. So he played his Rosewood Casket story, and then I asked him after I had interviewed him, I said, Neil, do you have any ghost stories? And he said, well, I do, but it's not really a ghost story. It was about a story that they were trying to scare this other guy because they were vying for the same sweetheart, and they were following him, and they had a sheet. They always have a sheet in the mountains scaring people with it. But they followed him came out of the woods following him and kept picking up pace until they started chasing him, and he jumped a fence and oddly enough landed on a hog, and the hog took off. And so it was chaos, of course, and he laughed, and he said, I'll never forget, that is my favorite ghost story. So you never know what you're going to get.
That's good.
I used to know a guy in Cleveland. Well, actually, he was my ex-grandfather-in-law, I guess. And he would sit on the front porch, and when I'd go down there and tell me these stories of Foreigner,
Yeah.
Calico, and he talked a lot about CC camps. Have you heard of that?
He talked a lot about what? I'm sorry, you cut out.
These CC camps that they had over there.
Actually, yes. I actually visited with a man back in the 90s. His name was Howard Darnell. And Howard was a city kid who was moved into the CCC camp at the time when they needed to put young men to work. He came into Coker Creek to that CCC camp, met a young lady named Pearl, and settled and lived his entire life, other than the times that he was in the war. Came home, lived his whole life in Coker Creek. Most beautiful house, and when I went to visit him, he had a kerosene refrigerator, a wood-cook stove, and a black and white television that he ran from a car battery once a day to watch Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman.
Yeah, he would tell me about the CC camps. His family, his mother and father, I guess, and all his brothers and sisters would go down there, and they would get the scraps from the food that they were eating down there, and they would give them to them, and they would bring them back and eat them.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, because Foreigner and upwards, around Smithfield Road and in Coker Creek, that's very isolated. So, the people that I interviewed up there, they were do-it-yourself, type of people, and really knew how to live from the land and make do and be creative, and just being able to interview them and hear their stories of resilience and just so interesting. So I really enjoyed always getting to talk to those people.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite ghost story or paranormal or strange thing that's happened up there?
Well, I'm gonna have to say, in Coker Creek, the craziest, strangest thing that I ever heard was a couple of guys were out driving. When you don't have anything to do in Monroe County and other places in the southeast, you drive down the back road. You go for a drive. You drive the back roads. And so that's what these guys were doing, and they had pulled over in one little isolated place and separated, and one of them just came running back to the truck, scared to death. The other guy was telling me the story. He said he was white as a sheet. He was scared to death. I had never seen him scared in my life. And he said, "What is wrong with you?" And he said, "You're not going to believe this, but I looked down in the holler, and there was this woman, and there were lights flying around her head that looked like little people."
Wow.
And I thought, oh, wow, that is a really crazy story. And I never forgot that story. So every time I go to Crow Creek, I think, oh, wonder where that lady with the lights flying around her head is now. But yeah, that was probably the craziest story of Coca Creek. When you talk about Rafter and Cityco and ball play, a lot of the stories to do with ball play have to do, of course, with the indigenous Cherokee tribe, because ball play is named for the lacrosse type game that they would play. And it wasn't just a game for them, it was a ritual like thing that they would really get together. They did it a lot of times to settle disputes in a way that prevented them from actual fighting, but it was a pretty rough game. So I have a story kind of about that in a way, and I think that's a pretty creepy story. Ball play and Cityco, I have a really interesting story about an old church that it ended up being a paranormal experience that went through my family through decades, actually, that I think is very interesting. So I can talk to you about those.
Yes, please.
So there was a couple of guys, when it comes to the ball play area, they were actually in the area, had been in the area, and they had drove down onto the river, and they were fishing, and all of a sudden, on one side of the river, it just got super dark, and then they started to hear like something beating sticks against the trees, like lots of things beating sticks against the trees. It was very loud, and it spooked them. And so, of course, they had a hunting light, so they tried to shine it across the river, and those lights will go a long way. You can usually see them way off in the distance. That light would go into that void, and it would not shine across the river. It would almost like it was a vortex, so that it was actually eating up all the light from that hunting light, and it was going nowhere. And so it scared them enough. It got so loud and noisy that they eventually just packed up and said, "We're in the wrong place at the wrong time. We just need to get out of here." And they were telling me the story, and that's when I started to research a little bit more about the lacrosse type game they would play, and how it was a very important thing that they would do, and that it was that area is very sacred. So, I just don't know if it was a residual type of memory of the land, because I do feel like this earth is very old. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know how it holds memory, but I believe that a lot of our paranormal experiences probably just do come from time being simultaneous in a way, and things happening, and it just seems like that makes sense to me in my world. So I think that, I don't know what happened that night with them, but I do know that whatever that darkness was, the hunting light would not shine through it.
Wow.
Maybe it's a portal.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about that. A lot of people have talked about vortexes. There's actually a place that I was told about. Reagan Valley that's where I grew up, in Mount Vernon. It has a lot of spooky stories. But one of the stories I always heard as a kid was that they would never tell me where this actually was. And the tree is actually gone now, but there was a large tree, and it was along the side of the road, that you could walk toward it, and you could get to a certain point, and your hair would lift up. And it would feel like all of everything around you was sort of a void, just sort of like what I imagined that darkness was. So I always thought that was pretty interesting. I never wanted to ever find that tree. I'm glad they didn't tell me where it was. But as far as paranormal experiences affecting your physical body, I think my dad had the most interesting one ever, and he experienced this with my grandmother. He was probably 6 years old, and his younger brother was just a baby, and Mama loved to make crepe paper flowers for decoration day. And so she would always make these crepe paper flowers, and she would dip them in wax, and then she would share them with people in the community. They may have paid her, I don't know, but she would deliver them all around before decoration day. And one day she went with Daddy and his brother walking, because they walked everywhere they went in the community, and she was walking around and she was delivering house to house these crepe paper flowers before Decoration Day, and it started to drizzle a little bit. And if you know ghost stories, if it's raining and it's drizzling, it's going to be creepy. So she's
Yeah.
just trying to find a place, to get some shelter. And there was this old church. They call it the Old Kitchen Church. Kitchen being a last name of a family up there. And they went into this church. It was unlocked, not being used, maybe for storage, but the benches were still in there. They walked in, and Daddy said he remembers they walked to the front of the church, and all of a sudden they could not move. He could not move a muscle. He doesn't remember Mama moving, and he didn't see his brother move at all, even though he was a baby. No movement, no noise, nothing. So he said it lasted a few seconds, and then he was able to move, and they took off. Mama didn't even deliver the flowers. They took off and went back home. Well, strangely enough, when that old church was being torn down, as it always happens in Appalachia, you make use of whatever is old or could be reused. So when they tore the church down, Daddy and some others in the family, they helped tear it down, and they took some of the lumber. So they took this lumber, and they built a house that I call the Little House that I grew up in Mount Vernon. And they built this little house, and they built a back room on using most of that lumber. And Dad was back there one night, just reading, and he all of a sudden felt the same exact thing. He froze. He was wide awake, but he could not move. And it immediately took him back to that day when he was just a kid in that same church with that same feeling. And so he just so happened, I think he'd been reading his Bible, and he started to reach for it, and he started just in his head saying, whatever this is, I don't want it here. It needs to go. So it took a few minutes, and it finally just let go and lifted, and he could move again. But in that same house that I grew up in, when I was probably 10 or 11, they built a room for me, not out of the kitchen church wood, thankfully. But still, I was in my room one night, finally had my own room, very excited. My little sister, she was probably about 6, and she was a typical little sister, always busy, always playing, running around. And it was really late at night, so everybody had gone to bed, and something woke me up, and it was running circles in the house. And it was a small house, but it sounded like something very small was doing laps in the living room. And so there was the living room and kitchen was one room, and there was my bedroom door. So I thought, I'm going to scare her. I'm going to teach her a lesson. She is never going to try to get up and play at nighttime by herself again. So I'm thinking I'm really going to scare her, and I listen and I wait for the steps to get closer and louder, and I jump out to scare her, and nothing is there. My sister was in the room asleep, and everybody else in the house was asleep. So I have no idea, but I know that lumber, something about it, I don't know. There's some energy there that just hung on. So those are sort of like things that kind of combined and spanned throughout our lifetime that I thought was always very interesting. So I compiled those into the book for Mama and for Dad back in the day, about 15 years ago. As far as Appalachian culture is concerned, me growing up, there's 3 places that you always want to be cautious, and that is by water, in the woods, or in the back roads. So that's kind of where a lot of the stories from our family originate. It was either in the woods someplace, in the mountains, or on a back road, or someplace near water.
Well, I mean, like you said before, all scary stories usually start on a stormy night or, something like that. But really, a lot of paranormal investigation gators and stuff like that really do believe that the energy of running water, falling water, storms that does create more energy in the air, and things like that could actually help things to manifest that normally wouldn't have the energy to manifest. And so, but now you're talking about, say, stuff that happens with that wood, that could be explained as residual hauntings,
Mhm.
and that does tend to happen to objects and properties and stuff like that.
Oh, I agree. And speaking of objects, it reminds me of a story that's in the book about a mirror because, mirrors are always also very scary sometimes.
Yeah,
Weird things can happen with mirrors.
they're portals.
So, yeah, well, this one was, I remember it. I experienced it as a child. I know that this is just part of my lived experience that my aunt and uncle lived in a house. It was a trailer that it was in sort of, I guess, 1960s because this was the early 80s. So it was an older trailer that they had purchased while they were building their house. And it had a bar area, step up kitchen, dining area. And in that area, there was a little bar with a built in mirror into the wall. So you couldn't remove it, it was there. And when they first moved in, what they noticed was like she would clean that mirror, and it seemed like progressively that mirror continued to get foggy. Like it would just fog up, and she would clean it, and it just had like this white fogginess to it. And then the fog started to sort of take shape, and over the weeks, it started to take the shape of a face, which scared her quite a bit. And she was going to do whatever she could. So she loved to paint. She was a great artist. And so she painted in the same sort of color as white, a little bit lighter color. She painted these beautiful white flowers all over, like a vase of flowers all over this mirror. And of course, when we show up to visit, we're all asking questions as children, like, why did you paint the mirror? And they have, an answer like, oh, we thought it would be pretty. And then, of course, kids are very observant and they're very good listeners. So in listening, I realized why they really did paint the mirror. And so all of us were just sort of, once I told everybody else, this is really why they painted that mirror, we were terrified of that mirror. But strange things would always happen in that house. One of the things that happened was all the kids, she had 2 boys and a daughter, and they would go visit relatives across Mount Vernon from one side, basically, of Highway 68 over to the other. So they would all gather up and go with their dad, and she was cleaning one day, and she had thought that the younger boy had went with the rest, but she saw a little boy. And she asked him, like, why are you back early? Who brought you home? And he didn't say anything to her. And she yelled his name and tried to find him, and she thought it was really weird that he was hiding from her. And then about the time that she was trying to look for him, of course, the car pulls in, and everybody's accounted for in the car, and we have no idea to this day who the little boy was that just happened to show up at this house.
That's
Oh,
crazy.
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
it's not
that.
I love doppelganger stories, and it's not the only one that I ever heard. I heard another one that was an actual first-hand account from an aunt. I'm telling you, my family, they have all these stories. But sometime, I think it was in the 80s, my aunt was getting ready for bed, and she saw her sister, they're close to the same age, she saw her sister in a blue gown walk into the house while she was in the kitchen, and she started talking to her, and then she went to the spare bedroom, but she had leaned up against the wall with her head down like she was upset. And she asked her, what's wrong? And she wouldn't answer. The woman didn't answer, and she went straight and just swiftly went into another room. And so my aunt thought, well, maybe she just wants to be alone. She didn't answer me, so I'm just going to let it be. And then the next morning she woke up and remembered, I need to go check on her because she seemed to be having a really bad night. So she went in, the bed was made. She thought, wow, she left really early. So she called her to check on her, and she had been with her family the whole night. Her sister had not been anywhere near her house, and it looked identical. She told me, like, she swore this woman was identical to my sister. So 2 doppelganger stories, I guess.
That would be kind of creepy. You think that it's a relative, And so
Yeah,
you're just like, oh, okay, whatever. And then the next day,
yeah,
find out otherwise. It's like, what were you doing here?
yeah. Extremely unsettling when you find out that
Yeah.
that was a mystery the whole time.
No, yeah. I don't get creeped out often, but that would creep me out.
That
Yeah.
yeah. Well, something that close to home and faces that you see every single day not
Yeah.
being who they are, that's definitely one that would keep me up at night. So, um, I don't know if you've heard of Donley Cabin,
No.
but Donley Cabin is a cabin that was built in the 1800s by a man named, his last name was Donley. And it's actually, I don't know if it's still available for rental from the Forest Service, but people do camp there. And so some cousins of mine decided they were going to have this big thrill and they were going to go during Halloween. They were going to rent out the cabin and all of them were going to go stay in it. And it has no, of course, no electricity. It's primitive camping. So you had to bring your sleeping bags and everything. And there was rocking chairs on the porch and they brought camp chairs, I think. So they're all sitting around, and immediately when it got dark, everything got quiet except for the rockers on the porch that started to rock. And then it sounded like something was walking across the roof. So they were like, oh, we're in the middle of the woods, just wild animals, it's fine. And they had actually latched the door, so they were sitting around trying to scare each other. And the door flew open. The door was shut and latched, but it flew open immediately. So they packed up and decided, okay, that's enough. We're gone. Let's just get out of the woods. So they took off out of the woods. But we have heard several people say that in the area of Donley Cabin and Donley Cabin itself is a really creepy area. Um, they always feel like they're never alone and that somebody's always has an eye on them. And so my son and his cousin, they like to go also camp in this primitive cabin up there near the river, and they feel the same way. Like we, no matter how alone it feels, we have something watching us all the time up there.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now, do you think, what's that feeling? Does it feel like it's, do you think that it's a person, or do you think
It's,
it could be a
I,
Sasquatch or a
I
ghost?
think I'm not really sure. I think the feeling of being watched is more out of whatever's watching is more out of curiosity or guardianship than anything else. It's almost like they're holding space, saying, this is our territory. We want to watch, keep an eye on you because you're. It's okay, but we want to just still make sure that you're being kind and being good to where you are. And so
Right.
I feel like that's probably the feel of it the most. Now there is a story, Coca Creek. There are stories of things stalking, and one of the ones that I can think of most is a guy who was out hunting. He was by himself, and we always said as kids, like, we don't go hunting by ourselves ever. That's not like if we're going out at night, we're going together, but we don't go in the woods at night. We don't whistle in the woods. We cover our curtains over in the nighttime. We don't look out the window in the dark. But this guy was by himself for some reason, and he had been hunting, and he was on his way home. I think he was squirrel hunting. I'm not sure, but as he realized after a few steps down the mountain that he could hear an echo of steps behind him. So it was like it was trying to match his pace, but it kept a little bit of a distance, and it would begin to match his pace quicker and quicker. So the faster he tried to go home, the quicker the pace of this whatever was behind him got. And so he then stopped, and the footsteps stopped. And he shined his light around, didn't see a thing. So he decided when he saw the porch light of home that he was going to make a run for it. So he starts running, and the faster he ran, the faster the pace, of course, got behind him, that he could just feel like this thing is on my heels, and I have got to make it to that front porch. So when he got almost to the porch, he started to yell for somebody to open the door. And he yelled and yelled until finally somebody heard him, and they opened the door, and he slammed it behind him, and something slammed against the door.
Oh,
And they
geez.
opened it and looked everywhere. There was nothing injured, nothing to be found, but something physical was actually following him, and it did hit that cabin door and made a noise and a big thump. So we're not sure what it was, but it was definitely something that was interested in stalking him and following him.
Sounds like a Bigfoot.
Sounds like a Bigfoot.
Yeah, they like to
Yeah.
mimic you when you're like walking, and they walk beside of you at the same pace, and when you stop, they
Oh,
stop.
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep.
So again in Mount Vernon, my dad and his brothers, they walked in the 60s everywhere they went. So they would walk and visit family members. Didn't think anything of walking a long way during the day, during the weekends, and always late at night when they were coming home. So my uncle, who was the oldest, told the story about walking home one night, and as he was walking down the main Reagan Valley Road, he was walking along the road and he could hear again something behind him that was walking, finding the pace with him. And he turned and didn't see anything, but he could almost in places hear like clicks. So he would hear a click here and there, and he thought, that is just weird. What is this? So he turned, and the way he told us, and honestly, now that I'm older, I think, was he just bluffing? But he said, I turned and I saw this shadowy figure thing, and I ran as fast as I could toward it with my head down. I was going to tackle it. And he said he ran toward the direction, and when he looked up, as he thought he was in the, closing in on it, going to tackle it, there was nothing there. So it probably moved pretty fast, or who knows. But that was an experience, just like the one in Coca Creek that's lower down the mountain in the valley area of below Tellico. So we have a lot of varied stories about things stalking us in Mount Vernon, along Tellico Plains, and then, of course, in the mountains, too.
Yeah, I lived on Reagan Road for a short time, Reagan
Did
Valley.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
That's where I grew up.
there was a house down there. It was like an old white farmhouse that was told to be haunted by something. I can't
Mm.
I can't remember exactly where it was at or anything, but I always remember them telling me about this house that was on that road. It was like in a curve.
Okay. There was a lot of stories in that area of just haunted structures, but also the land being just really strange and haunted. Church graveyards there, lots of accounts of people seeing things. One person accounted to me that they were driving around Eliezer, which there's a graveyard and a church, and that church still has an outhouse. It's falling down, but it's still there. It's a very old church from the 1800s, and he swore that he glanced over and saw the fence along the graveyard. There were three men there in suits standing and talking, and he thought, what are those men doing here in the middle of the night? It's pitch dark almost, but he could see them, and started toward him to see, like, who is this? And there was nothing there. So it was there one minute, gone the next.
Mm.
And then another person, different church, but same area, they were walking along a different road, noticed a woman on the church steps. And of course, it was the proverbial lady in white that we hear throughout history. But it was a lady, he explained, had never heard the story of the lady in white from anywhere. But he said she was on the steps and she was wearing a white dress and she looked like she was really sad and crying. And so I waved to her because she looked up, and I waved to her and she just immediately didn't pay attention to me. So he said I started to walk toward her to find out if everything was okay. And as he walked toward her, she stood up, looked at him, and walked into the graveyard area and totally vanished, like gone in an instant. And so, of course, that scared him enough that he decided to hurry home and told the story to everybody that would listen. But there's really strange stories all throughout Monroe County in the valleys, and even Sweetwater. They have some. Like I said, I worked as a tour guide for the Lost Sea, and whether those stories were true or not, they sure scared me when I was on boat duty down there by myself. At night, during the day it was like nighttime, and so it was scary. But yeah, there's a lot of strange things happen around here.
Yeah, they used to tell a story at the Lost Sea I guess it was in that main cavern, the big open up cavern where there used to be a bar down there.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
people would drink and drink and drink and drink, and it wouldn't
Yeah.
affect them until they got up on the surface. And they,
Exactly. Yes. The temperature and being underground, they didn't feel the effects of the alcohol, but for some reason, somebody decided to make the way out these tall steps
yeah,
in the beginning of the time, the cavern tavern, and yeah, people fell down the steps quite often. Once they started up and got nearly to the surface, they would feel the effects and just fall down. Of course, it was called Craighead Caverns, and they tell the story that it was used for indigenous tribal council meetings, most likely the Cherokee, and possibly before that. But it was used, and it was used by people in the area to store vegetables like potatoes. Um, Funny story, not really scary. It was scary to me at the time, but I was on a tour, and we were talking about the potato pit area where people would cover over their potatoes, and it was like a community potato storage. And they would go get them as they needed them because it's 58 degrees or so underground, and so a good refrigerator when you didn't have one. I was in my, story telling all about this, and I noticed that the people were watching something over my head, and one of them had a video camera, so he's shining the light, and as he shined the light, I could see the shadow of something, and he said, "There's a bat." And so maybe in 17 and thinking, I know I practically live in this cave. I am not going to act like I'm scared of anything. I said, oh yeah, these bats, they don't bother you. They're around, but they will not bother you. And about that same time, this bat starts to fly all around my head, and I flipped out. And I'm sure they thought, this woman, we are calling her bluff, because I was terrified of that bat at that moment.
That's funny.
yeah. Well,
We were doing a one of the I don't know places we was at last year. I think it was at Halloween. We actually had a guy come up and tell us a story about Cityco Creek, him being there hunting, and he said that he hasn't gone hunting since, but he said that he was up there at night. It was nighttime at this time. They'd already hunted all day. They come back. They were had their camp and everything set up. Fire was going, and after they ate and stuff, they went to bed. Then they started hearing like wood knocks and stuff,
Yeah.
and then something started. More than one something's started encircling the camp.
Wow.
Circling the camp, and
Yeah.
he said it was Bigfoot, but he said that next morning they packed up and they left, and they've never been there hunting again.
That reminds me of a meme I saw not too long ago that said, in the daytime I don't believe in ghosts, but at night I'm a lot more open minded. Because when it gets dark in those woods and all the noises show up, it's just so apparent that you're not alone, and you don't know what all is on the other side of the tent or everything else. And we hear a lot of accounts in the Indian Boundary area, Cityco Creek area, of drum sounds, lots of drumming and rattling sounds, like shaker rattles.
Yeah.
So there's been several people that have told us stories about that, terrified them. They would leave in the middle of camping because they couldn't handle the nighttime noises that they couldn't explain.
I would love to hear that though, because I would almost guarantee that would be a residual haunting type thing of the natives when they lived there.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
think that, like I said earlier, that the land holds on to stuff, and there were some things that have happened throughout time here, and it just seems to converge in this one area, and other places are probably the same. That Tellico Plains had 3 huge mounds. We don't know if it was Mississippian or otherwise. There's a lot of research that's gone into it, but I still have not found what resonates with me. Like, yes, this is definitively it. I cannot really put my finger on it. But my dad he was there when they were excavating. I think it was the University of North Carolina. He was a young boy when they were there, and they were measuring out where different structures were along the area of the plains, and they were opening up and finding human remains, but they were large humans. So the skeleton that he watched them measure was 12 feet, just the skeleton, and its chest measured 24 inches across. And he watched them measure it and held it in his memory like, this is the biggest person I've ever seen in my life. And he told that story to me over and over again because he said, that really happened. I want you to always remember that I saw this with my own eyes. They uncovered something there that was bigger than any human I ever saw. So who knows? It's just very interesting.
Well, that could go back to a lot of, Native American folklore of the giants and stuff like that were here, during the time that they were here and even before they were here.
Absolutely. They told stories of the red-haired giants and the giants that would stalk them. So you have a lot of that happening sort of over and over, whether it's supernatural or actual happened in ancestral times. But I tend to believe stories that I hear often. I know that there has to be some grain of truth there. There has to be something, we have, of course, Bookaloo, that was kind of like the Bigfoot, and there's a Boojum from North Carolina, and the Booger, everybody called it that. That was like the Bigfoot of the area, and of course the White Thing. My grandmother actually swore that she saw it one time. She was visiting. We sort of lived in this little community where my grandparents had a house and my aunts and uncles, and then our little house, we were just within walking distance of each other. And so she would walk from place to place to visit everybody, and she was visiting my aunt. We had a pretty huge barn, and then below the barn, there were what we call the bottoms that were just like this place where Papa planted peanuts at this big level area of ground. And she came in the door, shut the door behind her. She looked scared to death, and she swore. She said, I saw it. I saw the White Thing. It came out of the barn, and it started down slowly toward the bottom, and then it just sped up and it was gone. And she believed all her life that she had saw it down on our property, and people used to hear it. They would say, it screams. It sounds so lonesome. It's the worst, howling, screaming sound you've ever heard, that type of thing. It would mimic women's voices or women's screams. Sometimes, things like that. So there's a lot of stories about that.
Well, a lot of stories like that, you have of Bigfoot doing the same thing, right? Saying for women, they'll sound like babies and stuff like that to try to lure women into the woods.
So it changes.
And other things, yeah. So they try to lure women and kids into the woods for some reason.
Oh, that's very scary. And that reminds me of the Nunahi, or the Cherokee Little People, the people who live everywhere story, where the story was that they were protectors of the land. They also watched out for people, the innocent, protected others. So I don't know if you've heard the story of Naquasi Mounds, where they were being attacked, and warriors were told or said to have come out of the mound, defending that land for the Cherokee. And so Naquasi Mound is very famous for that in Franklin, North Carolina. But the Little People of the Cherokee is also a very interesting story. And the Moon-Eyed People are different. Kind of reminds me of an Appalachian Lord of the Rings with all these different, characters. But it sounds interesting to learn more about it. I would love to do that eventually. I think it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of the the old Cherokee legends and lore and stories and stuff are just they are interesting because they go back for so long, and they're really tied to the people, but the land itself too, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just like the land in some way remembers, and it's sort of residual, of course, and holding space for the things that happen. So I think that's what makes it a little bit more spooky. It could account for the feeling of the vortexes and the strange happenings and the shadow people. Speaking of shadows, I have one more quick story that I thought was pretty scary. My cousin went to prom, I think it was around 2002. He's always been interested in spooky stories, but they were out to have fun, after prom. They were driving down Ballplay Road in a convertible, and ahead of them, all of the kids in the car saw this shadow figure. It was almost like it was limping, like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, across the road, pretty far ahead of them. So the driver kept his cool and thought he would have to not have to hit. He didn't want to hit this person or whatever it was. So when he made it to him, he had passed. That the girl in the car had a camera. It was prom night. And this was 2002, so no, smartphones. She got up out of the convertible and she just started to snap pictures one after the other. And when they got the pictures developed, it was mostly, a blur that you could see that somebody was taking pictures while the car was moving. But on a few of them, there was this black just swipe of a smudge. He showed me the pictures. It was the creepiest thing. There was just this huge smudge across a few of them, like, whatever this is, it's not letting you take its picture, or else it's in another dimension and you just can't get there.
Mm-hmm. That goes to there's a lot of stories about, people seeing things like that on the sides of the road where they don't know if it's a spirit or what it is, and those are some pretty scary tales
Yeah,
when you really think about it,
that's true. Almost like a sentinel or a guardian
Yeah.
there's something has happened there and they don't want people to forget.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of what it reminds me of. If they're just there for, a little bit of a warning to say, take care
Mm-hmm.
right here.
Yes. Another thing too, though, is we had it's been over a year, I guess, but one of the first times we had Mike Ricksecker on, and we was talking about shadow entities and stuff like that. He was at a location one time and they were filming, and he said that what he believes that they witnessed was neither. He said that it seemed more like a time slip.
Yeah.
So, like them seeing them, and it
Yeah.
scared the other thing just as much as it
Yeah.
did them, because they were like, what's that? What's that?
Like they were haunting each other.
Yes. Yes.
That makes perfect sense to me when I think about the minerals that are in the land here with the limestone and the other gemstones, different things that are in our location. The geology of this area would be very conducive to a natural time machine, kind of. Like it would, if you thought about it in scientific terms, the elements that you might need to combine to create a time slip could very likely happen in those locations where you have underground, crystals and gemstones and limestone and all these things together. I think about the crystal radios that people used to make, back in the 40s, and I think, okay, well, so they are used in a way to create sound or to gather some sort of waves through the air. So it makes sense to me that could be a possibility.
Oh yeah. Our area is full of quartz, and quartz resonates at a
Yeah.
specific frequency. I mean, that's why they have quartz watches and all that stuff, because the resonance frequency of that quartz itself is what helps, keep the time and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, quartz and all those things do have certain frequencies that are. It's amazing when you actually start looking into what they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
You take 2 quartz and put them under pressure and rub them together, and they'll create light.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
We actually visited New Haven, Connecticut, and there was a museum there, and one of their collections was different types of rock, and they were specifically ultraviolet rocks. So if you shine a certain light on them, they shine very ultraviolet colors, which
Mhm.
I found so fascinating. I had no idea that rocks could do that, but I was really fascinated by that.
Yeah, I watched some stuff on YouTube of people going on the shores and stuff up there with the black lights, and they find those yellow ones and the orange ones and
That
stuff
is
like
so
that.
neat. And
Yeah.
it's such a testament to show, even scientifically, that there are things in existence that we do not see with the human eye, but they are still there.
Yes.
And it's just very interesting, a very interesting correlation, I guess, that, the unseen is very present in our everyday lives and in areas around all over, the world, but very much so in Monroe County and Southeast and East Tennessee area.
Yeah. I got a question. I like history a lot. I don't know if there's anything paranormal that's happened there, but it's over, I guess it's on the Chirola Skyway or close to it. It's called, Fort Loudon Massacre Site.
Oh, the Cane Creek Massacre.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can you,
actually, I can tell you. So in the 1750s, Fort Loudon was established as one of the outermost posts of settlements by the Europeans in America at the time. And so it was also until 1819, around about that time period, it was also belonging to the indigenous tribes, very much so the Cherokee Nation at the time. So when Fort Loudon was established, they got along quite well with the Cherokee, but there was some tension that started to build until the point was that they were being held siege inside the fort, unable to leave. Part of that was because of some Cherokee that had been um, held prisoner and eventually lost their lives as prisoners at Fort Prince George, I believe it was. But there was, I think, 7 people, 7 Cherokee that died during that time. So they laid siege to Fort Loudon. Nobody could go in. Nothing could go in. Nobody could come out. They had to survive on whatever they could. So they ended up, actually, I think they had to make meals of their horses or any animals that they had in the fort. So eventually they came to the conclusion that, okay, we're going to make this agreement. Captain Demir, that we will let you guys leave, but we're going to escort you on the Tellico Road, which was the Warriors Trail or the Warriors Path, where the Unicoi Turnpike. We're going to escort you, and we're going to watch you, and then you're going to link up with other people in the area of Cane Creek. So they walked, if you can imagine, from Vonore area where the Fort Loudon, it's been reestablished, so the other one is actually underwater. But the Fort Loudon there in Vonore, they walked all the way to Cane Creek above Tellico Plains. When they got to Cane Creek to camp for the night, their Cherokee guide left. They weren't sure where he went, but it turned out later that night, several people were massacred. And they believe that the women and children were probably taken into the tribe because they were never found either. And so there is actually a house quite near this massacre location that has had very much paranormal things happen in it. People do not stay there. I think it might even be vacant if it's not torn down by now, because nobody would live there for very long. They would move in, and it would be so intense that they could not stay and live in a house with so much activity. And that's probably very likely the reason.
yeah. Now, was it the French or was it the British? I can't
It
remember who
was,
occupied the fort.
I think I
British, I
think
think.
it was British, because Fort Prince George was named after King George.
Okay.
Now that was during the time of the French and Indian War. Of course, the French sided with the indigenous tribes against the English. So there may have been some French warfare type, things going on at that same time because of their divide between English and the French and the tribal nations. But it was during the French and Indian War, yes.
That's very interesting to me. Maybe we need to go over and investigate that little plot of land.
Yeah, as soon as she was saying that, all that was going on, I was like, why haven't we gone and done an investigation there?
I think there have been a few people who have been into that location, and maybe there's been a few investigations. I'm not really sure. I've never really followed up on it. I do know a few people had asked some questions to me about it, and from history, I knew that had taken place, and I always thought that was very interesting that they chose that area. And of course, it had been Great Tellico, which was their chief town. They had several, principal towns, but Tellico was very much one of them. So that may have been where all the reinforcement was. But I do believe that the only ones massacred, the number of people massacred, equaled the number of lost indigenous people from Fort Prince George that had been taken prisoners. So I do believe that they just felt like an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and so they didn't massacre anymore. But then again, I may be wrong. They may have massacred more.
Yeah, I like that story. I mean, I don't like what happened, but I like the story.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the old sagas of, the times when America was early and a lot of things happened, and it was just, I can't imagine living in that type of wilderness and trying to, fend for yourself in an unknown territory. That would have been absolutely terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to most of the white settlers that came back then, like you said earlier, most of them were Scots-Irish, and they actually pushed the boundaries and went further than, where the king said that they were even supposed to go. They went further on and further up and in, and
that makes sense. I don't doubt that a bit, knowing people of Appalachia, that they're going to always push the boundaries
mm-hmm.
and say, don't tell me that I can't settle here, because they will.
I can't make liquor? What are you talking about?
I was just thinking of our stories that, we were going to talk about tonight, and I was thinking about Cityco and places, and I thought, my papa probably has still to this day, some stashed jars up there and a few stumps in those hills. He was definitely a moonshiner.
Yes.
And, that was just the way, and that's kind of how I look at it, as we can't change anything about the past. We just can make our daily decisions, but we can't ignore the things that happened either, because that's how we make sense of what we do today. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of why I share these stories, because I feel like, it just has been my way of making sense of things in everyday life, and a way of carrying memory that has lasted, hundreds of years rather than decades. And that's why I love interviewing the 80-year-old and 90-year-old people, because those stories, if I hadn't collected them, would have been gone forever. And there was some wisdom in there that I carry with me to this day.
Right.
I'm sure they love telling them too.
Oh yeah, for sure. They loved. I got taught how to make fried apple pies. I would leave with, special heirloom seeds that came over the mountain from North Carolina on a wagon. And, people would tell me, they would start their story with, did you know I was born on a blue snow? And of course that led to questions. So it was always an easy interview, because I rarely had to ask very many questions. They would always be followed by such rich storytelling. Mm-hmm. It just felt so easy and delightful that I will never forget the people that I interviewed, and just think of them often.
Yeah, the guy that I talked to that was from Farner, and he just named a bunch of different places every time. He was a good man, a great man. I'm not sure his last name wasn't Prock.
Oh, really?
He lived in Cleveland,
Oh, okay.
but he was from that area.
Okay. So that's my husband's family, and his grandfather loved to tell stories. He was from Steer Creek, in the Steer Creek area of above Tellico or near Tellico. But he worked for the CCC camp back in the day as well. So I
Yeah.
think there's probably a few Procks here and there, and could be possibly one or two in the Cleveland area.
Yeah, I mean, I would go down there like every weekend and see him with my wife then, and he kind of had sort of
Oh
Alzheimer's.
yeah.
And the first thing he would say to me is, "You ever hear of the foreigner?
Oh.
Yeah, have you ever heard of this? You ever heard of that?" And he is telling me all these stories about the CC camps every time. I just loved them. I heard them
Yeah.
before, but I love him telling me that. And
Yeah.
he even told me one time that he rode his bicycle from Tellico, from Coker Creek, um, all the way to Cleveland to see his girlfriend, which was his wife,
Yep.
then.
I
But he rode
believe
his bicycle that far.
it's very interesting how far they were willing to travel either on foot or by bicycle. I used to go visit with someone that we're sort of related to, but he grew up in Coca Creek, and he would tell me stories of traveling, getting started early in the morning and walking across all those mountains into North Carolina, far into North Carolina, walking miles every day, and then knowing that he was going to turn around and come home. And I would always ask him, like, how did you make it through the woods at night in Coca Creek in North Carolina without just getting scared to death? And he said, oh, well, you just don't think about it. But that's another thing with the older generation. They will just nonchalantly tell you the scariest things, just like they were telling you to go across the street, and get a drink of water. It was just so funny how they would their delivery, especially a lot of the men in my life. Their delivery was always just so nonchalant, like, yeah, this happened, yeah, that happened. The women, though, they could really tell some stories. They put a lot of emotion into it. So it was very interesting to see the different styles of storytelling, and I'm always fascinated by that still today because I love to hear stories and tell stories, and I think it'll always be a part of my life.
Yeah. Well, do you have any more that you might want to share?
I'm trying to think if there was maybe one or two I do have a couple of old stories about witches.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the first ghosts and like paranormal stories, I guess I should say, that I ever heard. I think that's like your weaning stories, is the stories about witches.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I was very small, and my cousins were very small, and we would hear time and time again, more times than one, two stories. One was about, and it was always somebody who lived just down the road. Have you ever noticed that? It was always close enough to scare you just enough. So it was always this person that lived over the hill or down the hall or down the road. And so that's kind of how that story always started. Was there's this lady, she was a little peculiar, and people thought that she was a witch because weird things would happen if people made her mad. And years later, I heard the story of the Bell Witch, and I thought, wait a minute, I have heard a similar story, just like this one, but right here at home. And so this lady, apparently, the story, the legend, because I'm going to say it's definitely got to be a legend. The legend was that she had the ability somehow to turn people into mules and use them to plow her field. And so,
Wow.
the story that I always heard as a kid was there's this lady and there's this man and woman that the family knew, and the man started to go downhill. His health started to decline. He was always tired. He couldn't get through the day. He just had all these physical issues. And he said, I feel like I have worked all night long, even though I've been asleep. I feel like I've been worked all night long, and I just can't get to rest. I just can't get well. And so the wife thought it was very strange. And there's always some wiser woman in the area that you go ask, and usually it's your granny or mamaw. So she went and asked an older lady, I think it was her granny, but she said, "What is going on?" And she said, "I think this woman is doing something, like putting some kind of a curse or something on your husband." And so she said, "I think you should follow her." And the story was that she heard her husband get out of bed. He woke up, he walked out in almost like a trance, out the bedroom, out the door, and she followed behind him. And when she talked across the hill, she saw a mule, and the lady had it getting ready to plow her field with it. And she took off back home. And my grandmother told this part of the story just as if it was the absolute truth. She said, so the woman went back and she wanted to find out, what do I do to get rid of this curse? What do I do? And the woman told her, this is what you need to do. You need to cut out the figure of a person, and it's going to be this lady that you're thinking is doing this to your husband. And you're going to take it and find a beech tree, and you're going to get an iron nail, and you're going to take it and tap one time into this beech tree. And then every single day after that, you're going to tap one time until that little paper doll is tapped all the way in. The nail is tapped all the way in. So my grandma swore that she witnessed this doll on this tree and that the bark had begun to peel off. And she said it was almost like it was trying to get away. Well, that was really funny to me. And I thought, well, it probably just killed, the bark probably just fell off the tree because there's a nail in it that, So she said that the health of the man, and another part of the story is always this. The way that you make this stick is that they're going to know that something's up. So they're going to invite you to their home, or they're going to send you a gift. So you don't accept the gift, and you do not ever go to their home being invited by them. So because if you do, you create a sort of agreement, and they can continue to do the mule thing. She said she followed all those instructions. The man's health regained. He didn't start going out at night. He wasn't sick all the time. And they just felt like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put a horseshoe over the door, and we're going to carry an iron nail in our pockets, and we're never going to go visit, and we're never going to accept gifts from this household. So that's what they said they did, and that's how the curse basically was broken. That story was told to me time and time again. The other story, I know, is so strange. Like, you can imagine being 7 or 8 years old and thinking, turn into a mule, what? They turn a person?
They're going to work you all night long.
That's pretty scary for a little kid, the ghosts and things I can handle, but turn me into a mule, I don't know about that.
Turned him into a horny toad.
Exactly.
Elvis would turn to a horny toad.
Great Appalachian lore. But the next story, it's the other sort of witch story that Mama always told. And she said, and Daddy told us a lot, they said that there was a guy who was really good at hunting. He could shoot so precise, he was so accurate. But there was this white deer that he came across one day, and he shot at it. Every time he shot at it, he was a good shot, but he could never hit this deer. And it was driving him crazy to think, I have got to figure out how to get this deer. And time again, he would never be able to hit it. So he told his wife about it, and his wife said, this sounds odd. She said, I think there's something more to this story, judging from her Scotch-Irish heritage, that, there's something more to this story. You need to pay attention. So basically she advised him to melt down a silver dollar, make it into ammunition, and use that to hunt with. So she said, the next time you see the deer, shoot it with that. And he did. He shot at it. He hit it in the leg, and it took off. He traced the blood trail to a house in another holler, and he went down, was going to go in and knock on the door, but he got spooked. He decided, maybe I'll go home and ask more questions first before I get into something. So he goes home, and he tells his wife, I hit the deer with that silver bullet, and it did bleed, but I traced it to a house, and now I don't know what to do. And she said, okay, you're going to go back to that house, and you're going to tell her that you're looking for your dogs, and you were out hunting, and you just wondered, if they had seen your dogs. Just make up that kind of story so that you could get some more information. So he goes to the house, he knocks on the door, and this young lady comes to the door, and he's a little surprised because he is not sure if she lived there. And so what he said was, I've lost my dogs. Do you live here? And she said, well, I do, but I'm staying with my granny. She lives here. And he said, well, do you think she's been out today? Has she seen my dogs? And she said, well, she has been out today, but she got injured. I don't know if she saw your dogs, but she was out walking, and she fell on a stub, and she hurt her leg, and it's bleeding pretty bad. So I've got her a doctor in her back here, and I've got her leg bandaged up to try to stop the bleeding, get her healed up. And he thought, okay, that answers a lot of questions, things that I never wanted to hear in my life probably. But he goes back home and he tells his wife, and she basically gives him the same instructions of never shoot at that white deer again, and never go near that house, put a horseshoe over your door, and carry an iron nail in your pocket. And so they had all these different protections that they had carried over, from Scotland and other places. So she used every bit of, knowledge that she had from the old world to defend their home against this white deer this person that could obviously, in the story, shapeshift into a white deer. So shapeshifters, stories like that, I found were very common in Scotland, Ireland, England, really all over. So, of course, they carried those with them, through the years as they settled in this area. And somehow it made it down to me here in the 1970s, early 80s.
Oh, what's funny is that iron is something that's used against the Fae.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do not, in the research that I've done, they are not, good with iron. They don't want to be around it. It weakens them or something like that. There's a lot of stories that I have read and a lot of research from Ireland and Scotland that say a lot about that, which I think is also pretty interesting, that it covers such a huge span of time and it still holds, the memory still holds.
Right. Well, there's some people now that are doing some investigations on they're actually looking at the old accounts of the Fae, because a lot of times the people were, when they were abducted, for better sense, they had missing time, usually a few hours.
Oh, yeah.
And they really think that it's almost an ancient abduction series, like what we would call a gray alien or alien
Yeah.
abduction today.
Very
That
interesting.
everything fits almost perfectly when it comes to it.
Yeah.
It's just they called it Fae. They called it something.
Oh, interesting. So they understood it to be the information that they had. They used, I'll tell you something creepy that happened with me and AI. I was working on some research, and I just decided I'm going to ask AI to show me a picture of the scariest thing in the mountains, in the Smoky Mountains, in the Tennessee Hills. What is the scariest thing out there? And it created a picture of a woman that had a really long neck, and her face was a very gray alien type face, but she had human skin, and her eyes were just terrifying. And I thought, holy smokes, that is the last thing that I would have ever expected this thing to show me was a woman in the woods. It's going to scare me to death now. I'm not going to go camping for a while. But yeah, I mean, those stories are prevalent throughout all of this area. And there's so much of, the missing 411 that can't be explained, and things that, disappear and then they show up that can't be explained. So it's very interesting to think about the possibilities of that being some type of abduction phenomenon, or, something to that nature. Or else, we hear stories of inner earth, beings and things like that. I've heard a lot of stories about that. Speaking of that, one last story. Um, a friend of ours was telling us, and looking at him telling this story, the man believed every word of it. He told us that he was out early in the evening, and he had walked, for some reason, was walking in his field, and there's like this big open field with tall grass. And that place is really eerie anyway, but he was walking and it started to get dark, and as he turned to come back home, down in the lower part of near his home on his land, he saw a figure walking, and he looked, and whatever it was stopped, and it was like they both realized that they weren't alone. But he said this thing, he swore he believed that it had scales. He said, if I've ever seen a reptilian figure,
Wow.
that person was a reptile person thing, because it was standing upright. It looked to have scales. It was a greenish color, and it looked like its head was like the shape of a lizard, and its eyes were very large. And it stopped, and he knew. He said, I knew it was staring right at me, and he could see it better than I could see. He could see me better than I could see him or her. So that's the first reptile lizard man story I've ever heard of this area, but it really piqued my interest on. That's another thing to add to my list of things I need to know more about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first I've heard.
Yeah.
That's
I don't
the only
think
one
I've
I
heard
had
any.
ever heard of. So I actually was talking earlier today, and I said, I really need to call him up and see if he can recount this story again, because it's been a few years. And I want to see if he tells it just the same, because the expression on his face, the look in his eye, like when he told the story, you could see the fear almost. Like he never wants to ever have that experience again.
Mm-hmm.
He saw a slee stack.
A slee stack. He was in the land of the lost, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's crazy. I mean, wasn't that in North Carolina or something like that though, where they had the reptile thing that damaged a car, like it chased some people and did some stuff.
Oh,
No, there's a book on it.
you're thinking about pretty sure it was the Lizard Man is what they called it,
Yeah.
but I don't remember.
I thought that was like
where it
North
was at.
Carolina or something. I don't remember now either.
I seem to remember that in one of Nick Redfern's books, he talks about a lizard or reptilian being, and I think it was in South Carolina or someplace. I could be wrong. That was really one of the first stories that I had heard, paranormal stories. And when this guy started telling me about this, I couldn't believe it. I just thought, oh wow. I thought those things were, at least I didn't have to worry about that. But now, yeah, we have to worry about that.
Yeah, that would be weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wonder what they eat.
Yeah.
People.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Cows missing. Yeah.
Maybe fish. I don't know. Maybe, but it was hanging around in like a pasture area. It's more like a hay field, I guess. Very open type field, but a lot of rolling hills. So who knows? Good hiding places, I guess, in those tall grasses and the rolling hills, maybe.
I think that could be where, like we was talking about time slips and stuff like that. I also believe that sometimes we have the veil will get thin between worlds, as far as alternate worlds.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Like they sort of blend together, and
Yeah.
like layers of an onion is kind of how I see
Yeah.
the layers of our dimensions of, we don't really know how many, but if you made a cross section, you could see that there are many, and we just have one little sliver of that onion skin, and it's layer after layer after layer.
Yeah. Yep. And then every once in a while you happen to see into something you weren't supposed to be able to see, even though it's paper thin right next to us at all times.
Yeah, exactly. It just lifts a little, and whatever the reason, it just happens.
Yes.
I think that could be the explanation for a lot of the things that happen around here and other places for sure.
Especially for like residual stuff that you see at the same time at the same thing.
Yeah,
That probably could be just the thin line that you see
mhm,
through at that certain point of time.
Could be.
You're
exactly,
actually
like
looking back into the
simultaneous.
past.
Yeah, simultaneous time, which I think Einstein sort of believed that. He believed that everything was happening all at once.
Mhm.
That with our linear thinking and our human brains, we just couldn't perceive it. It would be like perceiving exactly 22 carats. There's no way your human brain and visually you can do that, or I couldn't do that. But imagining all the multiple timelines and multiverse and the layers of dimensions and the
Yep.
time being all at the same time, I mean, that's some Star Trek stuff right there.
Yes. uh,
Well, we really appreciate you coming on, Tabitha, and telling us some really good stories. I mean, that was great.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. It's what I absolutely love to do is collect and tell and write stories. So I'm still continuing at my best to do that as much as possible. I actually am a school garden coordinator, so I teach kids how to grow food and
awesome.
Hmm.
other indigenous practices like holding that heritage in the area, teaching them about companion planting like the Three Sisters. And so I try to bring my storytelling into the classroom as much as possible with the science of growing food and harvesting and all that. But lately, I have wanted to get back more into the writing process. So I've revisited These Haunted Hills and I've sort of looked at it, did a little bit more research on some of the stories, and just really been in deep thought about my writing. So I created a Substack not long ago, about a month ago. And so it's substack.com at Tabitha Prock. You can find me. I did release about, I think there are 7 These Haunted Hills, like brief little stories there. One of them's a Bigfoot sort of experience that I had that I didn't talk about tonight, but it is there. The story's on there for free for everybody to read. It's a paid prescription, subscription. I used to get mad at people for saying prescription. Um, Subscription service, so you can subscribe and pay yearly or monthly. But then there are also many stories on there that you can subscribe and just continue for free. And those stories are available, including all the Haunted Hill stories, are available for free. So if you go on and subscribe for free, you'll still have access to these Haunted Hill stories and every new story that I release throughout now in the month of October. I'm going to try to do as best I can to get a lot of those paranormal stories out over the next few months for everybody to hopefully enjoy and collaborate on, and find people to tell me some more good stories.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll have another book come out sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm hoping that I can build on These Haunted Hills and collect, a few more good stories. I think definitely that Lizard Man's going to be one I'm going to have to work on.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there's a few that in a house specifically in Louisville. There's a small mound across the road from it. There's been some very strange things that have happened, and it's a farmhouse from the early 1800s. So it's one of the oldest houses when Monroe County actually became Monroe County. It's one of the oldest houses around, and it has some really good stories with it. So I've been collecting those and a few more. So I have a few notes together. I'll start to drop those through Substack, and then probably most likely everybody will read from Substack first. And when I have enough, I'll compile them and make them available digitally or in print.
Sounds good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had a good friend of mine that had a story about a mound. And it was his sister and his nephew. His nephew was pretty young at the time, but they were going back over to their mother's, or her mother. They was going to go visit her mother. And on the way there, they started to build a housing development, but they found a mound there, so then they stopped building, of course.
Uh-oh, yeah.
And but she said it was, just starting to get dark, and they started to round. It was like it's kind of almost a 90-degree bend there where you come around, and you can look off to your right, and then down the hill you can see the Tennessee River, and then there's a mound there.
Oh, wow.
And but she said before they come around that bend, she says there was lights going. She said it almost looked like a rock and roll show, like all the lights and stuff going.
Oh, my goodness.
Said as they rounded the corner, there's a big UFO there.
Wow.
And it just kind of was just sitting there, and it just lifted up as she'd come around the corner. It lifted up, went across the trees where she was, over the road, and just she said in 2 seconds was gone.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
But it was over there, like where the mound was.
Yeah.
That's happened. I mean, there's been several accounts of that all the way back, to times when they would only report those things in the newspapers, of the day. Early incidents of those types of things. This particular story was a young boy who lived in the house at the time, was getting into a lot of mischief, and he'd otherwise been a really good kid, but he was getting into a lot of trouble, and he would always say that his friends did it. His friend told him to do it. And so all the things that he would do, he was constantly saying, but my friend said that I should do this, and get into mischief, basically. And finally, his mom said, who is this friend, and where is he? Because he's in trouble for doing all these things. And he said, well, he actually lives in the ground, but he goes into the tree in the yard, and that's how he gets to his home across the road where the mound is. And so the dad said, I'm putting a stop to this. I am not having this. So he actually, I think he cut this tree, decided he was going to cut this tree. And the person that told this story to me, and I have a family member who lives there now, and they have plenty of really good stories there too. But the story was when the tree was cut down, it had this sap that ran from it, and it was red. And he had never seen tree sap that red before. That it literally was red sap pulling out from around the tree when he cut it down. But the problems ended. The kids said, oh, he doesn't come around here anymore. So I thought that was very strange. And so I started to look into trees as portals and, different, because trees are actually the oldest living things right now on this planet. They're older than anything else other than the Appalachian Mountains, but they have been here for a while, and we don't know maybe everything, and trees show up often in folklore. So I just thought that was a very interesting story when you put all those into context.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Because you had like Norse Tree of Life and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
trees are very prominent.
Yeah. Yggdrasil, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Yggdrasil.
Yeah.
Yep. That's neat. So Landon is asking, what kind of tree was it? Do you know?
I want to say, and I may be wrong, that it was a crepe myrtle tree.
Okay.
I can find out. I can do some checking and double check on that. But yes, it was very strange. And even as a garden educator, I don't have any experience of trees having red sap like that. But I thought it was quite interesting and added just a little bit more spookiness to the story. So, I'm not sure exactly, but I do know that there is a mound across the road from that house. And people have experienced, children have talked to people in the house that are not supposed to be there, that they're much older. Specifically, a man who told her that he fell down the stairs because his chest hurt. And they looked into the history of the home and realized that, yes, an older gentleman did have a heart attack on these stairs years ago. And this little lady was exactly right about what happened to a person in this house.
Nice.
So a lot of strange stories to do with that structure for sure.
Wow. That goes beyond right there where they're actually having communication with.
Yeah, I think kids and animals tend to really be very perceptive when it comes to things that we don't see or feel. And we were actually watching some sort of documentary. I can't say whether it was a Dogman documentary or something to do with Bigfoot. It was one of the two. Last around this time, it was last year, and our dog is a little chocolate beagle named Biscuit, and he just is a very happy-go-lucky dog. But we were watching this one specific show, and there were no strange noises. There was nothing happening in this show to cause him any alarm whatsoever. But at one point, he starts barking as loud and howling as hard as he can at the television. And it was just a couple of people talking about these things. And so we were both like, turn it off, whatever it was. You know, we don't need that to upset our dog or our house. So it was very weird. That shook me a little because I thought, wow, you know, I never thought of that being able to affect us on this side of the television, but that was weird.
Well, so when it comes into manifesting, we can manifest things unknowingly by our thoughts and our actions and everything. And so I do believe that is definitely possible. But what I'm wondering, the first thing that popped in my head, and this is just comes from, I guess, all the years of you know, doing paranormal investigations and stuff, is maybe try to be quiet during that time and get a a really good voice recorder and record that part of it and see if you could put it in a computer, and maybe he's hearing something that no one else is. Maybe
something
there was
that we're not hearing.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
That really was extremely just strange for him to just walk straight toward the TV, like he was literally going to stand between us and the TV on the wall, and whatever he was hearing or seeing, you know, he perceived it as some type of threat, because he's a very gentle, kind dog, and he was angry and upset that night and was defending his home.
Yep. I bet you he heard something that no one else heard.
It'd be wild.
Yeah,
It'd be wild if that girl from The Ring stepped out of the TV.
We don't want the bad things like that to happen, but
wouldn't it be wild though?
Crazy. Just film it.
Yeah.
Film it.
That would be, that would be a story right there.
Yeah. That'd be a story, all right.
Yeah. Whether I would have the, you know, ability to tell it, I don't know. I have to rely on somebody else to tell that one, and me just be the innocent bystander.
We had a pretty crazy one back when Jason and I really first started. Well, it wasn't when we first started, was it? It was when we kind of started back up again. And we had a little girl that was she was being tormented, I guess. An entity was telling her to hurt her sister.
Oh no.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the Black-Eyed Children.
Yeah.
Okay, so I asked her to draw me a picture, and it pretty much was like a little girl, solid black eyes, looked like a black-eyed child.
Wow.
Now they're reported, but its mouth was open, and it had like rows and rows of like razor sharp teeth, like shark's teeth.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the interesting part of it is that I told it that I was going to get it out of the girl's house. So I went and did an investigation first. Then Jason was going to go in and do an investigation the next day, and, you know, kind of compare notes and see if we agreed on, because I honestly believe it was a object that was haunted. And but that picture, it was weird. I folded it up, put it on top of the microwave, and was going to take it to work, because at the time Jason and I worked together. when I got finished getting dressed and everything, came back out to get the photo, it was gone. It wasn't on top of the
Wow.
microwave. The wife's like, "No, sir, I didn't touch it."
That is
And
crazy.
I start looking for it, opening up the cabinets above the microwave, and there it is on the second cabinet up above the microwave, just sitting there.
Oh
How
my
it got
goodness.
there, don't know, because the wife and I
No.
were the only ones in the house.
Oh
So,
wow. It's
yeah.
very, scary because I do feel like, we're pretty creative beings, both energetically, physically, all the way around. And I think what we give density to can sort of show up and it adds more weight, the more density we give to that.
Mhm.
So, and I think fear is it's almost like a food, it's just a factor that always weighs in when we're scared. It feels like, that amps up the energy around us and it, I don't know, things just happen when that happens to us.
Right. Yeah, the one of a couple weird things that actually happened afterwards was, I came back home from work, 3 o'clock in the morning. The smoke alarm outside of our bedroom, all the smoke alarms in that house was wired in and weren't
Mhm.
battery operated, just started going off. But the second I
Wow.
jumped up out of bed and opened up the door and stepped into the hallway, it turned off.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and I told it, I said, "Look, I said, I didn't invite you over here. You're not allowed to be here." I pretty much told it had to leave.
Wow.
And I still said that I'm still going to get rid of you.
Yeah. There's
The,
there's a house in a family member still lives there. My husband refuses to spend the night. He says, "I'm not. No, no, not going to spend the night there ever." Um, but it was a house that when she moved in, um, we have actually gotten like her home landline would call our landline back in the day, and it would be the middle of the night, and we would think something has happened. Like, is there an emergency? Is she okay? And we would finally get in touch with her, and she was, I didn't call. But her number, we had caller ID, so her number showed up. Somehow or another, there was a connection being made so that
mm,
phone calls are moving from one place to the other through the landline. And I went up to visit, we all went up to visit during the day one day, and I was standing, not really doing anything, but I was looking into a mirror, and there's this little porcelain cat, and it just, like, literally just slid off of the shelf. I was standing right in front of it. It slid right off the shelf toward me and fell to the floor. And everybody just stopped and looked like, what in the world? But water will turn on, like the sink, the water will turn on by itself. Um, Somebody was in the bathroom, turned the water off, started to walk out of the bathroom, and heard the water turn back on.
oh, that's
And
amazing.
that was probably the creepiest thing with the water, that happened was that they literally witnessed the water being off and then the water coming on by itself.
Wow.
So that's happened quite a few times. But what they found out was, and she didn't know this when she bought the property, but um, a man had actually lived in that house alone and had passed away, and nobody checked on him. And so it was a while before they found him. Somebody came to check on him, and he had passed away alone. And that she didn't know. She'd already bought the property. She had already been living there. But some neighbor kids actually came over and said, "We don't like your house," and basically proceeded to tell her the story of this man who used to live there that died. And since then, she's been very suspicious of everything, every little bump and, thing that happens in that house because some strange things really have happened. And I think we've all sort of witnessed in one way or another a few things that we just can't explain.
Wow. That's amazing. Those are the kind of houses we like to investigate.
Those are the kind of houses my husband likes to stay away from. So
When
we
we
don't go
first started
there.
it, Jason would have concurred with that.
Yeah. I didn't like it. I stepped away for 2 weeks after the first sign of trouble, and I
Oh yeah,
wouldn't go
yeah.
back. I don't know. It was weird.
That's kind of how I am. Like I love to hear some stories, and then when it gets a little too creepy, I think, okay, I'll let somebody else investigate that one and write about that one. Just tell me more about the other stuff. So I kind of try to steer clear of some things. They just frighten me a little bit too much. Um, but there's tons of stories that people have told me that I still really haven't investigated that have to do with haunted places and appearances of people time and again, accounts that they swear, this happened, I witnessed it, I saw it, I experienced it. And it's really hard to say, no, you didn't. It's kind of impossible to say whatever happened didn't happen because knowing myself, the things that happened to me, at one point in my own house, I saw a black figure coming down the hallway, and I was asleep in the recliner. And I headed toward it and was basically like, get out of my house, half asleep, but also very angry and scared, not really realizing what I was doing, I guess, and half thinking I was dreaming. But I know I wasn't dreaming because my husband, at the same time I did this, was in the bedroom asleep, and he yelled, and he said, Tab. And I said, what? And he said, why did you do that? And I said, why did I do what? I'm in the living room, in the hallway. And he said, why did you jerk the blanket off me? And I said, I didn't jerk the blanket off you. And so I went in the bedroom, turned the light on, and sure enough, the blanket had been jerked off the bed.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
I totally experienced that, firsthand account. Nothing strange has happened, like that until our little biscuit dog. But that was over 20 years ago, and we still live in the same house, and nothing that strange has ever happened, other than we have a scrapyard, and we've had some weird things show up there from just copper and aluminum making shapes and stuff in the driveway that we can't really explain. So some weird things have happened, but nothing to that degree that it did
Yeah.
about 20 years ago. That was probably one of the scariest things that ever happened to me in my life.
Wow.
That's,
It's a good story too.
yeah, that's a good story. Look at that. We coaxed more stories out of you.
We did. So we got just about 12 more minutes, a little under. We do want to thank you for coming on, and
Absolutely. It's been great.
hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah.
Sometime we can.
So how do you feel? Did your nervousness go away?
Yeah. Once I started talking,
Uh-huh.
I'm a lot more calm. You were absolutely right. I was terrified all day. I was just so nervous. I woke up nervous, and I thought, why did I decide to do this? And I had already sent, the link out to my friends. I was so vigilant. Like, I was so excited to share the link and say, oh, I'm going to be on the YouTube and tune in and listen. And then it hit me sometime last night, like, Tab, what did you just do? You just sent all these invitations out, and you have no idea what you're doing.
Well, there's just like 30,000 people listening right now.
Oh, that is crazy.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
It's okay if there's just 3 people.
Yeah, it's a good show. A lot of people showed up.
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
And we got to do it again. Whenever, we get a chance, we'll
Sure.
holler back at you.
That sounds great. I'll start, I'm working on some stories now, gathering some information and doing some research into some things that I've been told recently. And usually everybody pretty much that I meet, they have some sort of strange story, especially if they have lived here in the rural areas. And most of Monroe County is rural, so we have a lot of hills and hollers and woods. So there's plenty of stories still out there, and I'm just very excited about writing again. I haven't written in a really long time, so it's been a while, and I'd just like to get back to it. Another thing about my Substack is I used to do a column called That Was the End, and it's stories about growing up in Mount Vernon, growing up in Appalachia, some funny stories, some just special stories, special to my heart. But those can also be found on Substack as part of the collection of stories. So if anybody's interested in reading any of the things that I love to write. I love to hear from readers. So I invite everybody to just check it out and, read a few stories that I have available. And if it resonates, fantastic. I would appreciate, all the attention and companionship that I can get from readers. I just enjoy that, and hearing from them and getting to know them is always a highlight of any writer. So I just appreciate that too.
That's awesome.
All right. Yeah. And that's substack.com/@Tabitha Prock.
That's right. Yes.
I got it up on the screen so people can see it.
Great. Thank you.
Also, you can find her book on Amazon, These Haunted Hills.
Yes, it's available in Kindle Unlimited. So if you have a Kindle Unlimited account, it's free to read. So you can just check it out through Kindle Unlimited, or you can order the digital version, the Kindle edition, and there's a print edition. I think I've got it set at about $6. I tried to be really reasonable and make it available to anybody. So if you have Prime, it's free shipping, and it's $6. So check it out if you want just a copy to keep for yourself. It's that small little booklet that, was just a collection that I intended for my grandmother, and then people started to ask for copies, so I made it available on Amazon because that just is the easiest place, I think, for people to find. And Substack is my way of just having works in progress and sharing it with the public quicker than I would be able to in book form. So that's kind of where I am with that.
All right. Well, we hope you have a good night and the good rest of your night. We kept you for about 2 hours.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, it went by really fast, and
It does.
We hope you enjoyed it.
I did. I'm going to enjoy this dark ride home. I drove down so that you guys could hear me really well without thinking, now I have to walk back to the house down the driveway. So that was, that was
After
not
telling
what I was
ghost stories.
thinking. After telling all these stories, yeah. So maybe they'll leave the light on for me.
There you go.
So this will go up on our YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble if anybody else wants to hear Tabitha's stories.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate all the listeners out there.
All right. Thank you.
You have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was awesome.
That was a great show. I like the stories.
Yes.
And I like the history too.
Right. You kind of get both. Huh?
Yeah, she brings the history along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
So guess what, everybody?
It's time to go.
It's about time to go. But before we go, I want to show you something.
Show them.
We're almost done. This is our copy. We need to make some more revisions, but we've got a new, look, it's green. It doesn't show up in the,
hold on. Let me fix that.
The words does not show up because they're green. Is that not awesome?
Let's see if I can fix it so you can show it.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, now.
How's that? Okay. So now you'll be able to see it. You can see our green screen behind us. Right here. Newest one, Comprehensive Guide to Paranormal Investigations. So it's a nice little thick book. Yeah. So
yeah, it's going to be on Amazon.
Yeah, with our other book.
Yes.
East Tennessee Hauntings and Lore, Edition 2. But this is the new book right here, A Comprehensive Guide to Paranormal Investigations. We will have a companion book.
Yep.
Which is not really a book. It's a
journal.
That'll be going with this too. So But yep, so you could see it. It's about to come out, everybody. About to come out.
Oh, yeah.
Get ready for it. If you like paranormal investigations, this is one of those books that will lead you down the road of how to.
Yes.
So,
All right.
so remember, you can find us at paranormal411.org, Paranormal 411 on Facebook, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Tune in live every Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Saturdays from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, also on Saturdays from 10 to 11. If you're in the metro Atlanta area, you catch us on WDJY-FM. That's 99.1 FM. Now, for listeners outside of Atlanta, you can still listen. You just go to WDJYFM.com or click the link on our website. We're also on Subspace Radio on all major podcast platforms. Remember, we do have a book out now called East Tennessee Hauntings and Lore Edition 2. It is East Tennessee Hauntings and Lore Edition 2. It is available on Amazon or at paranormal411.org. Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
We'll see y'all Thursday.
Everybody have a good night. Have a good weekend.
Stay curious.
Yes.
Have you ever wondered what lurks in the shadows? What secrets the night hides? What strange phenomena might be happening just beyond your perception? Join us as we journey into the world of the paranormal, exploring everything from ghosts and UFOs to cryptids and unexplained occurrences. From haunted houses to all things paranormal, join us in the search for the truth behind the veil. Welcome to Paranormal 411.